Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for being with us. Well, like last summer, the Truckee Meadows Water Authority asked customers to cut back on their water use in hopes that we won't run out of water in our reserves if this drought continues. And now that summer is winding down, we take a look at how we did and what this means moving forward. John Irwin with TUMWA is here to talk about that with us. John, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Okay, so this past summer it was a 10% ask, voluntary cutbacks, this time around like last year. How did it go?
Well, as you know, we started in May calling for voluntary reduction about 10%, and the target we were trying to achieve was about 5,000 acre feet, by holding back 5,000 acre feet in the reservoir in the event the drought goes another year. So far through, actually yesterday, when we did the calculations, we've saved about 4,900 acre feet, getting close to that 5,000 acre foot mark, about 99.9% of the way there. So it's just been fantastic the way the community's responded in this voluntary call for conservation.
Yeah, that's pretty good, you know, considering we're already probably in a place where they're mindful of their water use, so having to cut back 10%. Were you surprised at how well people did?
Well, not really, because in the drought when we had in beginning 91 through 94 period, we had some really dry years then too. And we had, then Sierra Pacific was in charge of the water, and they made the same calls for conservation. In those days, we had about a 17% reduction in overall water use. So the community responds very well when we get into situations, as long as they understand what the need is for, what the purpose is, and how we just want to plan for next year in the event that it's as dry as this year.
Right. Now explain why the cutbacks happened when they did. I know that when savings happen matters, because you can't just cut back at any time and have it be as valuable, correct?
Correct. The biggest bang for the buck, or the biggest savings time, is during the irrigation season, obviously. We serve 4 times as much water in the summer months as we do in the winter months. So when we did the calculations in March, looking at and doing the forecasting, we anticipated, we're going maybe using 12,000 acre feet of our reserves. And so because that's a large number, we wanted to start that messaging really early. So we started in May, and our board was on board with that and kind of directed us to do that. Launched it late April, May, and good thing is it rained in May, and then surprise, surprise, it rained again in June. Mm-hmm. So those cooler temperatures in May and June also helped us save water production and so on and so forth. So the whole thing just began to snowball in May, and then we say the savings accrue in June. Hottest month, July. Next hottest month, August. We've had some warm temperatures in the last few weeks, early in September, but now we see the temperatures are cooling down. So we're winding down the irrigation season, and again, thanks to our customers for being so responsive. It's just been fantastic.
Now, still asking for the cutbacks now, or can people kind of ease up?
Well, we would still encourage smart use of water. Let's get through the season. Let's continue with our 10% call. Sometimes September can warm up, sometimes it can cool down, we just don't know what. But let's get through the irrigation season, which is basically through the end of September. That ends our water year that we do the calculations on. And so once we get into these cooler temperatures, once we get into freezing temperatures, then begin to cut back your lawn irrigation. Just begin to be smart about how you use your water.
Because at this point we are running on reserves, right?
At this point, we are running on reserves. We have the 2 reserves in play. One is the groundwater pumping here in the Truckee Meadows that we've increased, and then also our reserves that we're releasing that currently out of Stampede and a little bit out of Donner Lake.
So how are our supplies looking now?
We started the year with about 26,000, 27,000 acre feet in reserves upriver. We anticipate at the end of the season we will have used about 9,000 of those. So we'll have 19,000 somewhere in there. 17,000 as we start the next season. We anticipate it to rain. It does snow. We just don't know when nor how much. Mm-hmm. We anticipate some refill, adding back to the amount that we used. So we will have used approximately 5,000 that we will not be able to recover, perhaps, unless we see a real snow season that knocks the socks off of everybody.
Yeah, fingers crossed for El Nino, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, just speaking worst case scenario, how long can we sustain, you know, living off of our reserves?
Well, we've just are in the process of implementing what's called the Truckee River Operating Agreement. Once that gets into play, and we've done some calculations on what this particular reoperation of the river will do for us, because currently the river is fairly fixed in when you have to release and holdbacks and storage and so on and so forth. Under this new operating agreement, we'll be able to retime our capture of water, read-time releases, so we'll be able to build up our reserves much more. For example, had we had the operating agreement in play last year, remember I said 26,000 acre feet, we estimate we might have had somewhere between 33 to 36,000 acre feet. It's hard for people to understand it. Wow, that doesn't seem like a lot of water, but it is a lot of water when you're dealing with dry years, successive dry years. So with that operating agreement, you could actually repeat, and we did present it to our board just the other day, about let's do 2015 again, and with actually Truckee River operating agreement, we increase storage, we continue to accumulate storage over the period. So this agreement is a massive game changer for the way the Truckee Meadows Water Authority is able to generate its supplies and to actually grow its drought year reserves. At full build out and full utilization of that project, it could actually triple the amount of water that we would have compared to what we have today.
Now I know initially it was a 9-year drought that Tumwa planned for.
Correct.
Is that still in place? Now we're what, 3 years into it? 4 years, getting into 4 years into it?
Right, the current drought cycle began in 2012, so we're into our 4th consecutive dry year. Will 2016 be the 5th? We don't know. The 87 to 94 planning period is +1 is a 9-year planning period. It's the worst drought of record, despite the fact that we've had these 4 consecutive, and 2015 is the lowest recorded precipitation, the lowest recorded, highest temperatures, lowest recorded snowpack that we've had in 110 years of record. We just don't know what 2016 will bring us, and so I can't really answer the question, but we're prepared for it. The system is designed to continue to, we will store some water in the spring when it runs off, and then we'll have it available for us when we need it in the summertime.
So suffice to say, we're not going to run out of water next year.
Correct.
Or in 2 years.
Correct. That's the way we designed the system, is not to run out of water. That's what our customers told us. We don't want you to run out of water. So, okay, let's engage the Truckee River operating agreement. Let's use our groundwater resources so that we don't run out of water, even in these critical dry years.
It's an alarming thing because you look at some of these towns in California that literally ran out of water because of this drought. And I think, you know, living in the desert, it's definitely a reality that we deal with. Is there a concern there that that could happen?
Actually, it's interesting you bring that up because, again, going back to why we engaged in this operating agreement, that scenario is not a scenario that will happen here in the Truckee Meadows. The other difference is the water supplies we manage, we own specifically for drought use. They don't get used all during the year in a wet year or a non-dry year. They're just specifically up there for these dry and critical periods. A lot different than what we have in California, where you have to have releases either for agriculture or municipal. The other big difference is we're serving 400,000 people here in this valley. You got 2 million, 2.5 million, 13 million in the Bay Area and so on and so forth. So the magnitude is so much larger in terms of the water needs in those areas compared to this area. Okay. And the big story there, point I'd like to make again, is the fact that we own and control our reserves specifically for drought purposes.
No, it's good to hear, definitely. All right, so this operating agreement that's going to be in place here pretty soon, why has it taken this long to get it in place?
Well, there's a lot of parties of interest to how the Truckee River works. You have the federal government, which owns reservoirs. You have the Truckee Meadows Water Authority that owns a lot of water rights, has a demand to meet of its customers. You have the Newlands Project, which is the Truckee Carson Irrigation District, which has rights that it diverts water. You have the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe, which has its interest in waters for endangered species recovery, threatened species recovery. You have the state of Nevada involved, and you have the state of California involved, and numerous communities and thousands of water users along the system. So let's put them all in the room and come up with an agreement. You can imagine herding cats might have been a little bit easier than this. We started this process in the early 1990s. The actual negotiating the agreement, the actual planning for let's re-engineer the river began back in the 60s and 70s and the 80s.
All right, so big win, good to hear.
It is huge for the community.
Okay, one thing that's changing here pretty soon is going from some flat rates for customers to metering. That's kicking in the next couple of weeks. Tell me about the decision to go from flat rates to metering for everyone.
Good question. A lot of the discussion tying back to the Truckee River operating agreement and what we call the negotiated river settlement, which Harry Reid was very instrumental in moving that through Congress. One of the conditions of the operating agreement is you got to retrofit the system with meters. And when we began that project back in 1995, there was 43,000 flat rate services on the system. One of the criteria is it couldn't be paid for by existing customers. Okay, so now you have to charge new customers to pay for retrofitting the meters. After some $40 million, $45 million, we have completely retrofit the system for those customers that were required to be retrofit. And over the years, we've been providing our customers with information regarding, had you been on the meter, you would have spent this much money or saved this much money. So many of the customers, I'd say close to 80% of the customers voluntarily converted over because they saw the benefit, a wintertime bill versus summertime bill. And so we finally came down to the end where we just have some 4,000, 5,000 customers remaining. It's time to flip the switch after 20 years of planning for this, so that obviously we have then equity in the system, equity in the billing, everybody's on the meter. As we say in business, you can't manage what you don't measure, and so the only way to measure water consumption is with a water meter.
Makes sense.
So that takes place October 1st. The bills go out based on the meter readings up to whenever their last meter read was, and they will be getting a metered rate bill at that point.
Okay. All right, John Irwin from Tama, thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We
Nice to see
are
you
out of
again.
time. All right, well, coming up on Face the State, the political blitz is already upon us with a marathon campaign season before the election next fall. I'll ask an expert why it's happening so early this time around and what we should be paying attention to right after the break.